My name is Megan Whitaker. I was 32 years old when I found out my parents had charged a luxury cruise to my credit card while I was lying in a hospital bed, 30 weeks pregnant, being told by a doctor that stress could send my daughter into the world too early. It was a Friday afternoon in Charleston, room 318, the kind of room where every sound feels too clean. The blood pressure cuff squeezed my arm every 15 minutes. Hazel's heartbeat tapped through the fetal monitor like a tiny horse running somewhere far ahead of me. The television was mounted in the corner with the sound off, flashing through the noon news, while my lunch tray sat untouched beside the bed. I was half watching a travel segment about a new cruise leaving Port Canaveral when the camera panned across the VIP boarding deck. And there they were. My father, Arthur Whitaker, lifting a champagne glass in the navy blazer he only wore when he wanted strangers to know he had money. My mother, Marlene, laughing under oversized sunglasses. My sister, Brielle, holding her phone high, filming herself like the ship had been built for her entrance. Then my brother Colton turned toward the camera, wearing a cheap captain's hat from the gift shop, grinning like a man who had never once worried about who paid for anything. For a moment, I did not move. Then I opened my banking app. Seabright Voyages. Premium Family Suite Package. $4,860. My card. I called Colton. He answered on the third ring, easy and bored. "Where are you?" I asked. "At work," he said. Behind him, clear as a bell, a ship announcement crackled through the speaker. "All passengers, please report to your muster station." I looked at the ceiling. Hazel kicked once beneath my palm. "Then work hard," I whispered. And I hung up. What they didn't know was that the cruise charge was not what destroyed them. It was only the first honest number they forgot to hide. Please subscribe to support the channel. Here is a fun little challenge. I bet you are watching this video while lying down with your legs crossed right now. If I guessed correctly, type 3 in the comments. If not, type 4. Let's see how many viewers I got right. And if you enjoy this story and would like to support our team, please consider buying us a cup of coffee through the link in the description. Your support helps us continue creating more meaningful, emotional, and captivating stories for you. Thank you so much for your kindness and support. All right, enough talking, let's begin the story. I did not understand, not fully, how easily a family can turn usefulness into a leash until years before that hospital room, back when I still thought my father's praise meant I belonged. I was a medical billing auditor for a hospital network in Charleston. It was not glamorous work. Nobody clapped for the woman who found the wrong modifier on a therapy claim or caught a reimbursement code that should have been denied 3 months earlier. But I was good at it. I could look at a patient file, an insurance response, and a treatment note, and feel where the numbers did not sit right. My father owned Whitaker Mobility and Rehab Clinic, a private rehabilitation practice for older patients recovering from hip replacements, strokes, falls, and surgeries that made them afraid of their own bodies. To outsiders, it looked warm, family-run, trusted. There were framed thank you cards in the lobby, my mother's hydrangeas on the front desk, and soft piano music playing low enough to feel expensive. But inside our family, the clinic ran on favors nobody called favors. I was 21 the first time Dad set a banker's box beside my coffee and asked me to look over a few things. He said, "You're the only one who understands the clean side of numbers." I lived on that sentence longer than I should have. That first year, it was a few denied claims, a few insurance statements, a few patient balances that did not match the ledger. I stayed up until 2 in the morning, checked the therapy notes they gave me against the billing codes they claimed were final, and handed Dad a folder so neat he kissed the top of my head like I was still 12. After that, every December became mine. While my brother Colton went skiing with friends, I reconciled claims. While my sister Brielle posted photos from rooftop bars, I reviewed missing signatures and dates of service. My mother refilled my mug and said, "Your father sleeps better when you help him." Nobody asked what it cost me. Not the weekends, not the holidays, not the private humiliation of being needed only after everyone else had made a mess. Colton had an office with frosted glass and a title. He signed off on reports he could not read, and Dad called it leadership. Brielle was called wellness coordinator, which mostly meant she filmed cheerful videos of treatment rooms she had never cleaned, and patients whose names she forgot after posting them. She called them sweetheart on camera, and asked me afterward how to pronounce their last names. And me? I had passwords. No title, no paycheck, no office, just access when something broke. I did not want my father's company. I wanted one clean line under my name that said I belonged there. Whenever I asked whether my role should be official, Dad smiled like I had misunderstood the beauty of being used. Family doesn't need paperwork to know who matters, he would say. For years, I believed him. Or maybe I needed to. Because once you admit your family values your labor more than your life, every memory has to be audited. The night I first understood the difference between being trusted and being used was the clinic's 20th anniversary dinner in November of 2023. It was held at a downtown Charleston restaurant with exposed brick, brass lamps, and white tablecloths that made everyone sit a little straighter. 46 people came. Staff members, referral partners, and a few former patients who still sent Christmas cards. That morning, I had reviewed 18 rejected claims Dad had sent me before the billing deadline closed. $13,000 would have disappeared if I had not caught the errors. By 7 that evening, nobody in that room knew it had happened. My father stood near the dessert table with a microphone in one hand, and my mother's fingers wrapped around his elbow. Arthur Whitaker knew how to look humble while being applauded. He thanked the physical therapists first, then the front desk team, then my mother for being the heart that keeps this place human. Marlene lowered her eyes like she had not practiced that exact smile in the car. Then Dad called Brielle, the voice of the next generation, because she knew how to make a treatment room look warm on Instagram. Then he looked at Colton. My brother was already leaning back in his chair like a man waiting for a crown he had measured himself for. Dad's voice changed. Softer, bigger. And one day, he said, lifting his glass, this clinic will be in my son's hands. The room clapped before he finished the sentence. Colton stood, laughing, pretending to be embarrassed, and hugged him in front of everyone. My mother cried. Brielle filmed it. I sat at table 7, beside the hallway to the restrooms, with a dinner roll cooling on my bread plate. A few minutes later, Dad remembered me. That is what it felt like. Remembered. He glanced in my direction and smiled the way people smile at furniture that has always been in the right place. And of course, Megan helps us with paperwork when we need her. There was a small laugh in the room, not cruel enough for anyone to feel guilty, just light enough to make me smaller. Colton raised his glass toward me and said, "To the paperwork fairy." It was the kind of joke that only works when everyone agrees the person being laughed at has no right to be hurt. I smiled because I had learned that if I did not, I would become the problem instead of the joke. After dinner, while everyone waited for valet tickets, I asked my father if he had ever considered making my compliance role official. He looked almost amused, as if I had asked for a name tag at Thanksgiving. He put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Family doesn't need paperwork to know who matters." The next morning, Colton sent a photo to the family group chat of his new business cards. Colton Whitaker, Director of Operations, my father replied. Proud of my boy. Brielle added 3 champagne emojis. My mother sent a red heart. No one texted my name. My name had fixed the problem that morning. His name got printed by sunrise. On Tuesday, the 9th of April 2024, the nurse at my regular appointment wrapped the cuff around my arm and stopped talking before the machine finished beeping. That is how you know something has changed. Not from the number first, but from the way a trained person suddenly becomes careful. She took it again by hand, then left and came back with my doctor. My blood pressure was 161/97, and the monitor showed small contractions I had mistaken for Hazel shifting because I needed everything to be ordinary. The doctor used the voice people use when they are trying not to scare you while changing your plans. "We're going to admit you for observation," she said. "Not panic, observation." I nodded like a good patient and asked if I could answer a few emails. She looked over her glasses and said, "Your job today is to stay pregnant." That should have been simple. A bed, a window, blue numbers on a screen. But simple is hard when your whole life has trained you to be useful before you are safe. Owen came straight from his shift station, still smelling faintly of antiseptic and rain. His uniform shirt was wrinkled at the shoulders, and there was a small mark across his cheek from a mask he had worn on a call. He brought my gray hoodie, my charger, peppermint lip balm, and the soft socks with yellow ducks because he said hospitals should not get to choose every texture. He did not make speeches. He put the bag on the chair, kissed my forehead, and asked the nurse what he needed to learn. My family's messages arrived bright and organized. Like a newsletter, Dad wrote first. "Heading to Atlanta tomorrow for the Healthcare Leadership Summit. Bad timing, sweetheart, but the clinic needs this." My mother followed with 3 red hearts, and "Rest and grow our girl. We'll be boring in conference rooms all weekend." Colton sent, "Holding down the fort, don't stress." Brielle added, "I'll bring you something cute from the hotel gift shop." I stared at those messages too long. They sounded reasonable, responsible, adult. Somehow, from a hospital bed, I still felt guilty for being inconvenient. That is the part I need you to understand. I was not angry yet. I was grateful. My father had always made business sound like weather, something no one controlled, and everyone had to dress for. If he said the clinic needed them in Atlanta, then the clinic needed them in Atlanta. I pictured beige carpet, weak coffee, name badges, and my father shaking hands with insurance people under fluorescent lights. I even told Owen not to judge them. "This summit matters to Dad," I said. Owen looked at me gently and answered, "You matter too." Nurse Evelyn Harper wrote my numbers on the whiteboard in square blue letters. BP, baby heart rate, meds, next check. She was 57, with silver at her temples, and the calm of a woman who had seen families reveal themselves under pressure. She noticed how often I checked my phone. She noticed everything. That evening, while Owen was downstairs getting coffee, she adjusted the monitor strap around my belly and said, without looking directly at me, "Some families show up loud, some show up useful. Don't confuse the two." By Friday morning, my room had become a small country ruled by monitors, medication times, and the blue marker on Evelyn's board. Owen was working a full shift because rent, insurance, and normal life still existed outside the hospital walls. My family kept sending updates from Atlanta. Delayed sessions, bad coffee, packed schedule. Colton wrote, "Clinic work never stops." I answered with a thumbs up, because I still believed we were all telling the same story. At noon, lunch arrived, and I turned on the television for noise. Within an hour, every message they had sent me would become evidence. The travel segment began as background noise. A bright-voiced anchor smiled beside footage of Port Canaveral, talking about a new luxury sailing with private balconies, chef tastings, and some ridiculous phrase like elevated coastal escape. I reached for the plastic cup of apple juice and missed it by an inch because the cuff started squeezing my arm again. The screen filled with sunlight, white railings, and people in linen pretending departure was a personality trait. I was not really watching. Then the camera panned across the VIP boarding line, and my body knew before my mind agreed to look. My father came into frame first. Arthur Whitaker in his navy blazer, the one he called casual but only wore when he expected to be noticed. He lifted a champagne glass toward someone off camera, smiling with all his teeth. My mother stood beside him, laughing under oversized sunglasses, one hand pressed to the scarf at her neck like she was in a catalog. Brielle had her phone raised, filming herself with the ship behind her, turning slightly as if she had found the camera on purpose. Then Colton turned, wearing a cheap captain's hat and grinning like the world had once again arranged itself around his comfort. The segment lasted maybe 4 seconds, long enough to end something. The cruise footage disappeared, replaced by a commercial for patio furniture. The room did not change. The same white walls, the same blue numbers, the same little gallop of my daughter's heartbeat. But something inside me stepped backward from my family and locked the door. I picked up my phone with hands that looked steadier than they felt. The charge was not hard to find. That was almost insulting. Seabright Voyages. Premium Family Suite Package. $4,860. Posted 8 days earlier. My personal card. Not even the joint account. The card I used for groceries, medical copays, and the crib mattress Owen and I had argued gently about because I wanted the safer one and hated the price. The amount mattered, but the access mattered more. Someone in my family had not borrowed money. They had assumed my name was available. My card had been saved months earlier in the clinic's vendor profile for one emergency supply order Dad promised to reimburse. I remembered it because I had hesitated before typing the number in. Dad had laughed and said, "Megan, it's just temporary. You know we're good for it." Temporary, in my family, meant until someone responsible noticed. Now I looked at the cruise charge and understood that my card had been sitting there like an unlocked side door. They had not broken in. They had used the entrance I had trusted them with. I called Colton first. Not Dad, not Mom. Colton was the easiest lie to audit because he had never learned to respect silence. He answered on the third ring with that lazy confidence he used when he assumed I needed something fixed for him. "Hey Meg, everything okay?" I looked at the television, where a smiling couple now sat on wicker furniture under fake summer lighting. "Where are you?" I asked. There was a pause so small most sisters would have missed it. I was not most sisters. "At work," he said. "At the clinic?" I asked. "Where else would I be?" Behind him, a loudspeaker crackled. Not hospital, not office, not an Atlanta ballroom. A ship's announcement, bright and metallic, calling guests to their muster stations. Then laughter, Brielle's laugh, high and careless, the one she used when she wanted people to look. I placed my palm over Hazel because she kicked once, hard enough to make the monitor jump. For 1 second, I wanted to scream so loudly, every nurse on the floor would come running. Instead, I smiled at the ceiling, because rage, when it gets cold enough, starts looking like manners. "Then work hard," I said. I hung up before he could decorate the lie. That part matters. Liars love extra space. They furnish it. I did not give Colton a room to build in. I put the phone face down on the blanket and breathed the way the doctor had taught me. 4 counts in, 6 counts out. My daughter's heartbeat steadied before mine did. 2 minutes later, Nurse Evelyn stepped in, glanced at the monitor, then at my face. "You need anything, honey?" she asked. I looked at the blank television, the lunch tray, and the phone holding the first clean proof my family had forgotten to hide. "Yes," I said. "I need my laptop." Gloria Finch brought the laptop herself. She was 66, retired from teaching 2nd grade, and the kind of neighbor who owned 3 spare keys, 2 flashlights, and no patience for vague emergencies. She had kept a spare key for me since Owen started overnight shifts, back when I was still pretending pregnancy made me independent instead of slower. She arrived at the nurse's station with my blue tote bag, a phone charger, and a foil-wrapped banana bread because that was how women of her generation handled disaster. They brought carbohydrates and kept their questions folded. When Evelyn carried the bag in, Gloria stood in the doorway long enough to say, "Whatever this is, honey, don't answer anybody until you know what's true." Owen came an hour later, still in uniform, his face changing as soon as he saw the laptop open across my knees. I had not cried yet. That worried him more than tears would have. I showed him the cruise charge first, then the saved vendor profile, then the date. He did not defend them. He did not ask whether I might have misunderstood. He sat down slowly in the vinyl chair and said, "Tell me what you need." That was the moment I understood the difference between love and management. Love asks what you need. Management explains why you should need less. I started where any auditor starts. Not with the worst feeling, but with the cleanest record. Our joint account. 14 months of statements loaded one by one while Hazel's monitor galloped beside me. I did not search for betrayal. I searched for patterns. And patterns, unlike people, do not get offended when you question them. By the third month, I saw the first transfer. Small enough to miss if you trusted the household. $2,000. Memo line. Clinic bridge. Then another. Then 7 more. 9 transfers in all. $19,750, moving out of our life in polite amounts. Owen leaned closer, reading each line with the stillness of a man trying not to become angry, in a room where anger could raise my blood pressure. I didn't authorize those, he said. I believed him immediately. Not because I was generous, but because the verification trail pointed back to an old email of mine still attached to the clinic's payment profile. The same kind of leftover access my family loved. Useful enough to keep, old enough to pretend it did not matter. The money had not been stolen in one dramatic sweep. It had been walked out quietly. Like someone carrying boxes from a house they already considered theirs. I opened a fresh spreadsheet and named it personal, actuals, plain, boring, mine. Column A, what I was told. Column B, what the record said. Column C, who benefited. Column D, whose name was exposed. It was the oldest kind of truth I knew. 2 versions of a life placed side by side, until one of them stopped breathing. The cruise was the loud number. The transfers were the quiet ones. One aligned with a payroll panic Colton had texted about. One with Brielle's new camera equipment. One with Dad's lobby renovation. By midnight, the room was dark except for the laptop and the soft green blink of the monitor. Evelyn came in to check my pressure and looked at the spreadsheet without reading it. Good nurses know the difference between curiosity and witness. Numbers behaving? She asked. I almost laughed. No, I said, but they're confessing. She wrote my new blood pressure on the board, lower than it had been all afternoon, and left me with the door half closed. I kept working, because for the first time in my life, the file on my screen was not for my father. It was for me. I thought I was looking at stolen money. I had not yet found the place where they had stolen my name. I found the clinic portal after midnight, not because I was brave, but because fear has a strange way of making old habits useful. The login still worked. Of course it did. My father changed locks on conversations, not systems. The dashboard loaded slowly, blue and white and harmless looking, the way professional software always does before it ruins your life. I expected invoices, maybe more transfers, maybe proof that Colton had treated the clinic account like a second wallet. What I did not expect was a folder near the bottom of the shared drive labeled Compliance Reviews MW. I stared at those 2 initials for a long time. MW Megan Whitaker. My initials had always looked small to me, tidy and forgettable, the kind you put at the bottom of a review note before moving on with your day. In that folder, they looked like a door I had not opened, but had somehow already walked through. I clicked it. Hundreds of PDFs filled the screen. Patient names, dates of service, therapy summaries, insurance claim packets. Each one organized too neatly, like someone had dressed a lie for church. The first file was for a 74-year-old man recovering from knee replacement surgery. The treatment note described 25 minutes of supervised therapy. The claim billed 60. Another file listed a mobility brace with no delivery receipt attached. Another showed a high-complexity evaluation for a patient whose notes read like a routine follow-up. I did not need a courtroom to tell me what I was seeing. My body understood before the language arrived. These were not sloppy mistakes. Mistakes scatter. These lined up. Then I saw the bottom of the page. Reviewed by M. Whitaker. I read it once, then again. Then a third time, because there are sentences your mind refuses to accept until repetition turns them into furniture. I had never reviewed that file. I had never opened it. The signature beneath the line was mine, or close enough to fool someone who wanted to be fooled. A clean scan from an old year-end report, pasted under work I had never touched. My hands went cold in a room that was already too warm. Hazel shifted under the monitor strap, and I whispered, "You didn't just take my money." My voice sounded strange, almost polite. I scrolled through more files. The same line appeared again and again. Reviewed by M. Whitaker. My name under claims I had not approved. My initials on records I had not seen. For years, I had wanted my name connected to that clinic in a way that meant I belonged. They had finally found a place for it. Under the things they were afraid to sign themselves. The email thread was attached to one of the packets, hidden badly because arrogant people confuse access with control. Arthur, Colton, and a consultant named Preston Vale. I knew Preston by reputation. Healthcare revenue specialist, expensive shoes, smooth voice. The kind of man who said optimization when he meant pressure the line until it moves. His message was short enough to be deadly. Megan's review line gives the files credibility. Keep her visible but not involved. Cleaner that way. I sat back against the pillow and felt something inside me go completely still. I called Nadine Brooks at 12:47 a.m. She was a healthcare compliance attorney I had met at a conference 2 years earlier, and she answered like women answer when they know midnight is rarely casual. I talked for 6 minutes. She interrupted only once, to ask if I had downloaded anything. I said no. She said, "Good. Preserve access. Document what you see. Do not alter a single file." Then she paused. "Megan, listen carefully. Your credit card is the insult. Your name on those records is the weapon." I looked at the folder on the screen, at my stolen name repeating down the page, and understood that doing nothing had just become impossible. Before we begin, please subscribe to support the channel. And here is a fun little challenge. Check your phone battery right now. If it is above 50%, comment 1. If it is below 50%, comment 2. Let's see which answer wins today. If you enjoy this story and would like to support our team, you can buy us a cup of coffee through the link in the description. Every contribution helps us continue creating more meaningful, emotional, and captivating stories for you. Thank you so much for your kindness and support. Now, let's begin the story. Nadine stayed on the line long enough to make me repeat the rules back to her. Do not download recklessly. Do not alter. Do not confront. Record what is visible, when I saw it, and how I accessed it. You are not building a scene, she said. You are preserving a timeline. After we hung up, I wrote those words at the top of the yellow legal pad Evelyn had found for me. The page looked too ordinary for what it held. Date, time, folder name, file title. My own stolen initials, written neatly like they belonged to somebody else. Around 8:13 that evening, while I was still sorting what could be documented without touching anything, Brielle made the first mistake beautiful people make when they believe attention is the same thing as control. An Instagram story flashed across my phone before disappearing. 22 seconds, maybe less. Long enough. She was standing on a balcony suite with the ocean behind her, holding a drink the color of melted sunset. Her caption read, "Dad says business looks better with ocean behind it." Then it vanished. Not expired. Deleted. I did not screenshot it. I know people expect that part. They expect the betrayed woman to grab proof like a knife and run into the street with it. But Nadine's voice was still in my ear, and I had spent too many years learning the difference between proof and performance. Screenshots were for a fight. I was not in a fight yet. I was in a record. So I picked up the legal pad and wrote, April 12, 8:13 p.m. Brielle story. Cruise balcony. Deleted within 22 seconds. Caption. Business looks better with ocean behind it. Evelyn came in while I was writing, checked the monitor, then followed my eyes to the pad. She did not lean close. She did not ask for gossip. That was one of the reasons I trusted her. She adjusted the blanket near my feet, looked toward the window, and said, "Women don't always leave when they're angry. Sometimes they leave when the record finally gets clean." Then she wrote my blood pressure on the board and walked out with the quiet mercy of someone who knew I needed witness more than advice. My family group chat kept performing Atlanta. That was the sickest part, how ordinary the lies sounded once I knew what they were. Dad wrote, "Long insurance panel today. Big conversations." My mother sent, "Hotel coffee is awful. Missing you." Colton added, "Clinic work never stops." Brielle replied with a sleepy face emoji, as if she had spent the day in fluorescent conference rooms instead of a balcony suite. I watched the messages stack up, each one a small paper boat sailing across a flood they did not know had already reached my bed. Then my mother posted a photo. Beige carpet, a podium, a banner that read, "Southeast Healthcare Leadership Forum." For half a second, I almost admired the effort. Then I saw the watermark in the lower right corner. Stock image from the hotel website. She had not even cropped it properly. My mother, who could spot a crooked picture frame from across a room, had sent me a fake conference lobby while wearing sandals that were probably still damp from a cruise deck. I wrote it down too. Not because it broke my heart, because it proved she knew. Colton called at 9:02. I let it ring until voicemail. He did not leave one. He texted instead. "You okay? You sounded weird earlier." Weird. That was the word families use when your pain becomes inconvenient before they are ready to explain it. I typed 3 different replies and erased all of them. Nadine had said silence was not weakness if it was serving a purpose, so I wrote only, "Tired. Doctor wants me calm." He answered with a thumbs up. My brother had no idea how much truth a lazy man can confess by not asking the next question. By midnight, the legal pad had 2 full pages. Not accusations, entries, times, captions, deleted posts, fake updates, messages from a city they were not in. I placed the pad beside the laptop and looked at the folder still open on the screen, my name repeated under records I had never touched. They were still pretending to work for the woman who had already found the cruise, the charge, the balcony, the fake conference, and the stolen review line. For the first time all week, I did not feel abandoned. I felt positioned. The next morning, my mother came back from Atlanta early. That was how she phrased it in her text, as if geography could still be negotiated if she put quotation marks around nothing. She arrived just after visiting hours began, carrying a glass vase of blue hydrangeas and wearing a cream cardigan over resort-tanned shoulders. Her hair was perfect, her lipstick was soft pink. At the bottom edge of her sandal, caught in the seam near the heel, was a pale grain of sand. I looked at it longer than I looked at the flowers. "Atlanta was exhausting," she said, setting the vase on the windowsill. "Your father barely sat down." She talked about panels, hotel elevators, a terrible boxed lunch, the kind of details people add when they know the truth is too empty to stand on its own. I let her talk. Rule 1 of any review. When someone starts filling silence, do not help them. Evelyn came in once to check the monitor, and left without interrupting. My mother kept smoothing the blanket over my legs like she could press the lie flat. Then she stopped. Hazel's heartbeat ticked across the room, steady and small, and my mother looked at the monitor as if it had asked her a question. Her mouth moved before her courage did. "Your father wasn't always like this," she said. I did not answer. She sat down in the chair Owen had used the night before and folded her hands around her purse strap. "Before you were born, he had another clinic. Smaller. He lost it after an insurance dispute. People talked. The bank came. He never got over the humiliation." I watched her face while she gave me the version of my father that was supposed to make everything softer. Arthur at 30, standing outside a locked office. Arthur hearing neighbors whisper. Arthur promising himself, the Whitaker name, would never look weak again. I could feel the shape of pity trying to form inside me, because pain explains people. It does, but explanation is not the same as permission. A man can be wounded and still choose where he bleeds. "He just needs everyone to hold the line," my mother whispered. There it was. Not an apology, not a confession. A request dressed as family history. I looked down at her sandals again, at that tiny pale grain still clinging to the heel. Even me? I asked. My mother's eyes filled, but she did not say no. That silence did more than answer me. It filed itself. She left before lunch, leaving the hydrangeas behind like proof of care she had not actually given. The room smelled sweet and damp after she was gone. I wrote one more line on the legal pad. Mom knows. Mom explains. Mom does not deny. Then I sat with the strangest grief of all. The grief of understanding someone, and still choosing not to protect them from the truth. By the end of the next week, my body stopped negotiating. My pressure climbed past the numbers the doctors had been willing to watch, and the word they had been keeping folded in their coat pockets finally came out. Induction. They said it calmly, like a weather update, but Owen's hand tightened around mine. I remember looking at the whiteboard, at Evelyn's square blue letters, and thinking how strange it was that my daughter and my family's collapse were both being measured in numbers now. Blood pressure, heart rate, time between contractions, amounts transferred, files reviewed, names stolen. Labor took 14 hours. Owen stayed through all of it, not as a hero, not as a man performing fatherhood for the nurses, but as himself. Quiet, present, useful without making me pay for it. He counted breaths when I forgot how. He held the cup with the bent straw. He wiped my forehead with a damp washcloth and did not once tell me to calm down, as if calm were something I owed the room. When the pain got sharp enough to turn the walls white, he leaned close and said, "I'm here. I'm not leaving." It was the simplest sentence in the world. It felt like wealth. Hazel Mercer arrived at 3:26 inches the morning, 5 pounds 11 ounces, red-faced and furious about the change in plans. Her cry was small but insulted, like she had read the paperwork and disagreed with every line. They placed her on my chest, skin warm against skin, and for one clear minute, the hospital room stopped being a place where things were monitored. It became the first room she had ever known. Her fingers opened and closed against me, looking for nothing, and finding me. I had spent my whole life trying to be chosen. Hazel chose me by needing me, without asking me to disappear. I looked down at her and saw the lesson my family would have handed her, if I let them close enough. Be helpful and call it love. Be quiet and call it maturity. Fix the mess and call it loyalty. Let people use your name, your time, your money, and then thank them for trusting you. I could see it as clearly as a claim form laid beside a treatment note. That was the inheritance waiting for her on the Whitaker side. Not a clinic, not a last name, a job with no title and no end. Owen had stepped into the hallway to call his mother, his voice breaking before he got through the first sentence. Evelyn adjusted Hazel's blanket and pretended not to hear me when I whispered into my daughter's dark hair. "Not you. You don't inherit unpaid love." But I saw Evelyn's hand pause on the bassinet rail. She heard. Of course she heard. Nurses hear the sentences families are built on, and the sentences that finally tear them down. She only said, "She's got a strong grip." I looked at Hazel's tiny fist curled against my gown. "Good," I said. "She'll need it." That morning, while Hazel slept beside me, Nadine sent a message. "Everything is ready when you are. No pressure today. Just truth waiting." I stared at those words for a long time. For years my family had taught me that love meant urgency, panic, cleanup, rescue. But truth did not rush me. It sat quietly and waited for my hand. I looked at my daughter, brand new and still unnamed by anyone's expectations, and understood that the story was no longer about what my parents had done to me. It was about what I would not allow them to teach her. 2 days after Hazel was born, my father came to room 318 with a navy folder under his arm, and grandfather's softness arranged across his face. He went to the bassinet first. Of course he did. Arthur Whitaker had spent his life knowing the best thing in any room to stand beside. He looked down at Hazel for almost a full minute, and I hated that some part of it was real. His eyes changed. His mouth loosened. For a breath, he was only a grandfather meeting a child small enough to make every lie look temporary. Then he sat in the visitor chair and placed the folder on the rolling table between my water cup and Hazel's hospital bracelet. I had this drawn up properly, he said. Inside was an offer for Director of Compliance at Whitaker Mobility and Rehab. Salary, $145,000 a year, 12% ownership. My name printed cleanly on the first page. Exactly where I had wanted to see it for 11 years. I read it once with the girl I had been. I read it again with my daughter sleeping beside me. The trap was in the third paragraph. Retrospective billing correction and internal standardization for the preceding 4 fiscal years. Standardization, a beautiful word for burying what had already started to rot. My father leaned forward. This seat was always yours, Megan. I was waiting until you were ready. I looked at the signature line, waiting for me at the bottom. Was I ready before the cruise charge? I asked. Or after it? His smile held, but only because men like my father train their faces harder than their children. I asked about the $72,000 patient outreach salary. He said Brielle worked in ways I did not always see. I asked whose name would answer the door when insurance carriers questioned 4 years of corrected billing. His eyes moved to Hazel, just once, the way guilty men check whether the witness is old enough to remember. Then his voice softened into something almost holy. We either heal this family together, or we bleed together. There it was. The old sermon. Family as bandage, family as threat. I turned the laptop toward him. Nadine's portal was open, the timeline ready, the corrected statements queued, the disclosure waiting for authorization. My father stared at the screen like it had spoken a foreign language. You always wanted my clean name near your dirty numbers, I said. You just never wanted me close enough to read them. His hand closed over the folder. Think carefully. Families don't survive daughters who turn public. I put one hand on Hazel's bassinet, because I needed to hold the reason. Families don't survive making daughters into paperwork. At 5:07 on Friday afternoon, I clicked submit. No thunder, no raised voices, just a gray button turning blue and a confirmation number appearing on the screen. The room did not get louder. It got cleaner. My father stood slowly, closed the navy folder, and looked at me as if he were seeing the cost of me for the first time. You just burned your own last name, he said. I looked at Hazel, then back at him. No, I said. I stopped letting you bill under it. 18 months later, people in Charleston still told the story the way they needed it to sound. My father told his version at diners, in parking lots, and anywhere old patients might still recognize him. In his version, I destroyed the family over a misunderstanding. In his version, government paperwork mattered more to me than blood. I never corrected him in public. I did not have to. Records have a patience gossip will never understand. They sit in drawers, on portals, in court files, and they wait for anyone tired enough of lies to read. Whitaker Mobility and Rehab was ordered to repay and settle nearly $840,000 in improper claims, penalties, and legal costs. The annex building behind the clinic went up for sale first. Then the new therapy equipment disappeared. Then the sign came down. Colton lost his Director of Operations title, though I heard he kept the business cards in a desk drawer for months. Brielle took a full-time job at a dental office with a time clock and a manager who did not care how many followers she had. Preston Vale lost clients faster than he could rename his consulting packages. My mother sent Hazel's first birthday card to a post office box in Asheville. No return address, but I knew her handwriting. Inside was a pale yellow card with a watercolor rabbit and one sentence. I hope she laughs like you did. I did not answer. I did keep it. Boundaries do not always look like locked doors. Sometimes they look like small doors with rules, opened only from your side. Owen asked if I was okay. I told him the truth. Not healed, not bleeding. For that year, it was enough. I opened Whitaker Billing Integrity on a gray Tuesday morning, with Hazel on my hip and Gloria taking pictures from the sidewalk like I was graduating from something. Maybe I was. The sign installer pressed white lettering onto the glass, while Owen held the diaper bag, and Evelyn, who had driven 3 hours for it, stood with coffee in both hands and tears she pretended were allergies. My name looked different on that door. Not borrowed. Not pasted. Not hidden beneath somebody else's mess. Mine. Hazel slapped her tiny hand against the glass and laughed at her own reflection. I touched the letters under her fingers and felt the quiet arithmetic of the life I had chosen. I had lost the clinic, the Sunday dinners, the version of family that only loved me when I was useful. But I had kept the thing they were always trying to rent from me, my name. If you are the one your family calls responsible only when something needs fixing, check what they have attached your name to, and if they turned your love into a bill, let this be your sign to stop paying it. The lesson I carried out of that hospital room was not that family can hurt you. Most of us learn that early, in small ways, long before we have language for it. The real lesson was that love should never require you to disappear in order for someone else to feel whole. If the only version of you your family accepts is the useful one, the quiet one, the one who fixes the mess and asks for nothing, then what they are protecting is not love. It is convenience. For years, Megan believed responsibility would eventually become recognition. She believed if she worked carefully enough, stayed loyal enough, and kept cleaning up what others left behind, one day her family would finally see her. But some people do not fail to see you. They see you clearly. They see your patience, your skill, your kindness, your fear of conflict, and they build systems around it. That is a hard truth, but it is also a freeing one. Because once you understand that being needed is not the same as being valued, you can stop mistaking exhaustion for belonging. Family should be a place where your name is safe. Love should not use your credit card, your signature, your silence, or your guilt as payment. Real love does not ask you to carry secrets that can destroy you. Real love does not punish you for telling the truth. Real love does not hand you a role, only when it needs someone to blame. And healing does not always look dramatic. Sometimes it is one quiet decision made with shaking hands. Sometimes it is a door you do not reopen. Sometimes it is choosing that your child, your future, or simply your own tired heart, will not inherit the same unpaid debt. Megan did not win because she destroyed her family. She won because she stopped letting them define what family cost. She learned that peace is not found in being useful to people who drain you. Peace begins when your name, your work, and your life finally belong to you. If this story spoke to you, subscribe to the channel, share it with someone who needs the reminder, and comment below. Have you ever had to choose yourself over the people who expected you to keep paying?